So just to review, what we've done is we created almost a to-do list, if you will, or a list of items. We ensured that there are no duplicates that can be added to the list, and we have accounted for additional spaces at the front, the back, and in between. We've accounted for different variations of the word in terms of case sensitivity, and we've also added the functionality to be able to delete and edit items that are in the list. Hello and happy December. It's the end of the year and it's time for some fun Advent of Coding challenges. Hey, I'm Bree, a developer advocate and software engineer who loves a cute coding challenge. And over the next month or so, I'm going to be sharing with you my solutions to Scrimba's JavaScriptmas. It's the perfect challenge if you're learning how to code or you want to break up your normal daily coding routine. So without further ado, let's jump right into challenge 1. So welcome to our first challenge where we are trying to help Grandpa with his Christmas wish list. So I guess last year, Grandpa was able to add too many of the same item too many times because sometimes his thumb hits the spacebar quite a few times and it clogs up his list. So for instance, if we want to add socks, that should be one item, but maybe we've added a few too many spaces in between or at the end. We don't want socks to be added more than once. So our job is to work on this check duplicates function to make sure that no matter how many leading or trailing white spaces or maybe even white spaces in the middle of a string there are, we only have one instance for every item. So in taking a look at this criteria where we can see all of these are talking picture frames, but some of them have varying amounts of space in between or at the ends of the string, we want to make sure that this is all condensed down into one single item on the Christmas list. So after our first and foremost task of making sure that we don't have any duplicates and that we've accounted for extra spaces, we also have two stretch goals that we're going to go for as well. One of which is to make sure that no matter how the words are in terms of case sensitivity, we only have one item. And the second one is to see if we can delete any items that are in the list or maybe even edit them. So let's go ahead and get started with first and foremost making sure that we don't have any duplicates in our list. So the first thing I've done so far is create this normalize input function. And what this does is it's going to take any input that I get as a string. It's going to remove any spaces inside of the string. So when we take a look at one of our options, which is talking picture frames, but it has like quite a few spaces in between, it's going to find any of those spaces or tabs or anything like that, and then replace it with a single space. The next part is trim, which is going to be removing any trailing or leading white space at the front or at the back of the string, and then we're going to make it all lowercase. So the next thing that we're going to do now that we have our normalized input function is put it to work. Now item text is grabbing anything from this input whenever we enter something into it. So we can see in this instance, it's going to console log anything that comes out of normalized input. And socks is all lowercase and there was no spaces when I typed it. However, if we were to go through and let's do one of these, which has quite a few spaces in between, when we're looking at it now, there's only one space that comes between those words, even though there was quite a few in the actual input itself. Or if we use this one that has leading and trailing spaces, and we will just add a couple more in just for good measure, we see that the normalize function removes all of those from the beginning, from the end, and also from the middle. Now we have a couple things we need to do. The first one is we need to check to see if normalized input is included in our list array. And the list array is what is being used to actually populate the list itself. If the item is included in the list array, that means that it is a duplicate and we don't want to add it again. And if it's not there, that means it isn't already there and it's okay to add. Okay, so we're going to take our list array and we are going to use the sum function where we can define our own version of equality. We're going to take every item that's in that list array as it loops through, and then we're going to use that normalization function that makes everything lowercase, removes spaces and everything like that. And then we're going to check to see if our normalized input that we have created from item text is included in the array at all. And sum is great because the first time that it hits a match, it's just going to stop looping through everything else. And then for right now, I will just add a console log that there has been a dupe. So if we want to see this in action, I will add a couple of spaces and add the item, which is socks, and we'll enter that. And then I will add socks completely normal again. And this time we should see in the console that there's been a dupe, which we do. The next thing is making sure that we only add it to the array and render that list if there hasn't been a dupe. So we're just gonna move those two statements from the bottom up. Now I think this by itself is completely fine. For the sake of the challenge where we have socks and then I do the same thing again, it's not adding it to the UI, so it's working as we expect it to, but it might not be the best user experience because you can't exactly see why. So let's add a really simple message that just renders if we do have a duplicate. Okay, so what I've done is I replaced our console log with a render error function. Now what this is going to do, I have two of them, a render error and a hide error. What this is going to do is find the error container, which is just a really plain div inside of our HTML right above our list. And what it's going to do is whenever there is an error, we're just going to say, oops, grandpa, you already added that. And when we are ready to hide the error, because we don't want the error to persist for a long time, we have the hide error function as well. So now we can see if we add socks and then we'll repeat the same exact thing, we get this cute little message that says, oops, you already added that, grandpa. I just added it to the render list function that's going to remove the error if there is one right before it continues with rendering the rest of the list. So we can't enter socks multiple times, but maybe we want to add shoes this time. Now we can see that the error isn't there anymore. Just to review, our first two tasks, actually first three, are actually already done. We can ensure that we don't have any duplicates that are added to the list. We can ensure that we don't have any spaces at the beginning or at the end. And just to double and triple check, we'll use the inputs that we were given with the trailing and leading spaces and the ones with the spaces in the middle. And we can see that we can't add it. And we have actually already completed the third one. Now that was to make sure that we are handling case sensitivity. So if we add a cat hammock and then we want to add cat hammock again, but this time it's all lowercase and not capitalized, we do get our error. And this is because of a few things. The first one is because of how we are lowercasing the text in our normalize input function, but it's also because when we are looping through our array with sum, we are normalizing that input as well. So we're checking with everything lowercase to see if anything is equal, but when it comes to actually adding the items to the list, we're adding the original item text. So we're preserving the capitalization. 3 out of 4 isn't bad, but we can do better. So let's do our last stretch goal, which is to add functionality to delete or edit items inside of the list. So the first thing I'm going to do is come down to the render list function, and we want to add a little bit more to our list item instead of just the text content. So instead of just having the text content in our list item, we've updated the HTML a little bit to include our gift, but also 2 buttons. So now we can see when we add socks, we have 2 very large buttons next to our socks, which is for deleting an item, and then one for editing the item. Now these were kind of big and bulky, so I did add a little bit of CSS to make them a little bit smaller and a little bit more cute. So now that we have our buttons, what we need to do is add event listeners onto them so that when we add something to the list, these buttons know specifically what to do. Now you might notice we have a data index, and we're actually going to use that data index to determine which item in the array we are updating. Now, when we are adding our shopping list and adding the event listener that's going to listen for a click, that index is what we're going to be using to determine which of the buttons in the array is being clicked and which corresponds to which item. So we have 2 tasks to complete here for deleting and for editing, and let's go ahead and work on deleting an item first. So for deleting, we are going to be checking to see if the class list of the button that was clicked contains that delete button class. And then if it does, we're going to use the array.splice function to just simply remove it from the array. And then we're going to re-render the list again to make sure that it's up to date. So if we add a few items to our list and we click on the delete button for one of them, clearly we can see that I deleted shoes and now it is no longer there. If we deleted Tiara, so on and so forth. Now, editing was a little bit more complex, but nothing too crazy. We probably could switch out the text here for an input, but I decided to use something a little bit more native and something that's already there. Just for simplicity purposes, we're just going to be using a native JavaScript prompt. So we are going to prompt whenever that class list that for the button that we've clicked on includes the edit button. And the default value for the prompt is going to be the value for whatever item was clicked on. So for instance, in this case, if we add, I'm going to come up with something different than socks, but if we click on the edit button, it's going to pre-populate with socks because that's what the item was. Now, editing is actually very similar to what we did previously. And if we look at it, we are going to basically do the first thing, which is make sure that our new value is not blank. And then after that, it is using very similar logic to what we've done before to make sure that we don't end up with a duplicate item in the array itself. So we're going to normalize our new text value, and then we're going to check our list array to make sure that we're not adding a duplicate. And of course, if we do end up with a duplicate or grandpa has entered something that is actually already there again, we're just going to alert with a simple oops message, but we're not going to add it to the list or update that item in the list. And then if it's not a duplicate, we can go ahead and update the value of that index itself with our new input and then re-render the list. So what does this actually look like in practice? If we add a tiara to the list and maybe we say that we want to add Legos, for instance, we save it and we can see that our new item in place is Legos. But if we edit it and maybe we are very quick and hit the OK button a little bit too quickly, we can see that there is a message that we've already added it. So it's not actually going to add it to the list, or it's not going to allow us to add it twice. And just like that, we have actually completed our second stretch goal. So just to review, what we've done is we created almost a to-do list, if you will, or a list of items. We ensured that there are no duplicates that can be added to the list, and we have accounted for additional spaces at the front, the back, and in between. We've accounted for different variations of the word in terms of case sensitivity, and we've also added the functionality to be able to delete and edit items that are in the list. This was a really fun day one of JavaScriptmas, and I will of course leave the link below, like I said, if you would like to participate in JavaScriptmas as well. And I cannot wait to see what we are going to be building in the next challenge. Until then, happy coding!